Hello, good evening. My name is Roberta Timothy. I give thanks and honor to the ancestors and indigenous peoples of this land, Turtle Island, where I live, and I give thanks and honor to my ancestors and the indigenous peoples for whose shoulders I stand on. I'm an African transnational indigenous woman, Black feminist, womaness of West African ancestry. My language, tribe, land, name, and family have been taken away from me through over 400 years of colonization, anti Black racism, misogynoir, and other forms of intersectional violence. I'm surviving African enslavement through processes of forced migration. My peoples were incarcerated in the Caribbean, Latin America, and North America, and as such, I'm intrinsically linked to Indigenous peoples and their struggles for self determination, reparations, and justice. As a result of this structural violence and what I call health violence, racism, and brutality, I come from a working class background, and I'm always considered a daughter of immigrants. I'm a mother of two, living and resisting with a visual disability in Turtle Island, Canada. I'm an educator, researcher, community organizer, and therapist with over 25 years of intersectional anti oppression, anti colonial praxis experience. I've been often told that I'm very resilient. In fact, resiliency has been used to define how much what I call purposefully marginalized communities have survived adversity. Anti Black racism, anti Indigenous racism, misogynoir, heterosexism, transphobia, classism, ageism, among other forms of intersectional violence that so called marginalized peoples experience, have been recently equated and connected to resiliency. Studies, research, theories, funding calls, methodologies, and community practitioners are increasingly examining resiliency as a strength based approach. I've been told that I'm so amazing, that I've survived so much. Wow. That I've overcome so much barriers to be where I am today, that I'm a real overachiever. In fact, I've been asked on several occasions to speak about how I overcame, even sometimes being asked to be positive about the not so good realities of living in an anti Black racist world. Don't get me wrong, recognizing that I and my communities have moved through many traumas and dramas is an okay beginning, but it never can be the end result. The reality is that for oppressed peoples, quote unquote overcoming never ends. And resiliency is 365 days a year, 24 hours every day for a lifetime. That is usually cut short through physical, spiritual, and mental breakdowns based on critical determinants of health, such as racism, colonization, and intersectional violence. In other words, in other words, resiliency is about measuring or assessing how much stuff or oppression or hardship can you take and how you survive it or cope with it, rather than challenging or dismantling the structural violence that creates the need to be resilient. Hence, resiliency is still a tool of the state, sanctioning individuals to quote unquote stories of success, unimaginable strength, superhuman, subhuman perseverance, without collectively dismantling systems of unequal power, white supremacy, and unearned privileges. Example, or i.e., without demanding and fostering real social justice and change. Resistance and decolonization are better suited when discussing communities that face daily and historical challenge to living, as they speak to actively changing structural violence in the lives of oppressed and colonized peoples. For Black communities, resistance is a way of being. It's a teaching that not only helps us to survive intersectional daily acts of violence, but helps us actively fight against systems and practices that are anti Black racist and intersectionally violent. Resiliency can't stop the experience of anti Black violence in our schools, at the grocery, healthcare facilities, policing, parks, and most places. Resiliency asks us to cope with the violence and how we are impacted by it, but not to challenge it and destroy it. Resistance is connected to over 400 years of challenging colonial violence on the lives of Black, Indigenous, and purposefully marginalized peoples and our communities. Resistance is a rite of passage and allows for more than survival, looking for thrival types of existence that are needed to dismantle violence. Decolonization means literally dismantling systems that have historically and currently violated our peoples. Decolonization is about not only reimagining systems of equity, but creating them, utilizing transnational indigenous ways of knowing and recentering the lives of people who have been colonized. Decolonization is an act of resistance, and it is life and death for peoples who have been surviving colonization for hundreds of years. Colonization is not about just thus economic superiority sanctioned by white supremacy practices, but rather true social justice implementation and practices that embody actively taking apart structures that violate. Decolonization is being accountable for your unearned privileges, coerced power, and gains from white supremacy and colonization here and now and into the future. Resistance or the manifestations of emancipatory practice of the oppressed have been framed as interference, non-compliant, overt or covert opposition, all very important strategies to create anti-colonial praxis for surviving and dismantling colonial intersectional violence. Reimagining resiliency means actualizing collective resistance, decolonization for sustainable anti-violence change. Thank you.